Hello, I'm Ed Fuqua, young adult librarian extraordinaire here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
And I'm Michaela, human being, here at Woonsocket Harris Public Library.
We're continuing our grand tour of Victorian science fiction with another H.G. Wells book.
Yay!
The Island of Dr. Moreau.
Yes, okay, I love The Island of Dr. Moreau. Yeah. It's very exciting, and the themes inside this book, it's kind of the first time this sort of story was done. And
so much comes from this book.
Yes.
At the time it came out, it was never as good a seller as, say, Time Machine or War of the Worlds.
Which is bananas to me, because I'm just like, this is one of my favorites.
It may resonate more with modern audiences than it did with audiences in its own time. But it had a huge impact on pop culture that you can't even... you can't ignore.
Absolutely bananas from, like crazy episodes of science fiction television from the Twilight Zone.
They did an episode of Simpsons inspired by it.
It was in the Spy Kids movies.
It was. Yeah, you can't get around it. So for those that don't know, Island of Dr. Moreau is about yet another of his protagonists who do mostly observe things.
Yes, and these ones have names.
Yes, people have names in this one, although Dr. Moreau does not have a first name, merely a last name.
It's okay, he has a doctorate.
He's a doctor, and his name is Moreau. Prindick is our hero, so to speak. And yes, Prindick is washed up on an island. Actually, he sinks, his ship sinks, and he's taken in by this tramp freighter heading to this island in the middle of nowhere, which he's never heard of before. In the original edition, Wells actually gives the latitude and longitude of where the island is located, but in the revision that he did several years later, he took that information out. So it's a lost island with no location in the edition that's currently in print.
Too many people sailing out trying to find Dr. Moreau.
I read the McFarland annotated edition with the horrible garish orange cover, and it does the original version. So I got all the original version of it.
So you're ready to set sail and go
I'm
looking
ready
for
to
the
set sail,
island.
Well, I found Kong's Island on Google Maps, so, why not? So he discovers there's a scientist there named Dr. Moreau, and Campbell, his assistant, who's a man with many human weaknesses, let us say. And Moreau is conducting weird experiments, and as with so many of Wells' stuff, the book is so famous you probably already know what weird experiments Dr. Moreau is conducting. It takes that hero a while to figure it out, and finally they have an entire chapter where Moreau sits down and explains the entire plot of the book to him.
He sits him down and he goes, "You're close, but you're wrong."
Yeah, once he decides to lift the veil, he's like, "Oh no, my boy," and then he does the entire spiel. Literally an entire chapter is nothing but him explaining the plot to Prindick.
It feels like the end of Willy Wonka.
Where
he's just like, "No, it had to be you." This is
yes, Moreau is conducting experiments, changing animals into people. Now today that immediately smacks of genetic engineering, but Wells had never heard of that term, of course, because he was writing in the 1890s. So the whole concept of that sort of thing was unfathomable to him. But one thing that was very known to him is vivisection, which is cutting up living animals.
I've read too many books with vivisection in it, and it's just every time.
It's horrifically awful. It's illegal in today's society. And although it was made illegal in Wells's time, the anti-vivisection laws didn't pass until 1876. So it only been illegal for a few years, and apparently it still went on all the time.
Yes, and just for anyone who doesn't know what vivisection is, it is an autopsy of a living creature, pain meds optional. Just full autopsy while the creature is alive.
It's horrific. They don't describe in detail. Wells doesn't describe exactly what happens, but just trying to imagine slicing an animal open and reshaping its flesh until it has a more human form. Dr. Moreau says he's obsessed with the plasticity of living flesh.
Yep.
And that sort of chilled down my spine when I read it as a kid, the plasticity of living flesh. That's a really horrible concept.
They talk about he unfeelingly cuts the quilt of living organisms, and it's just
vivisection was tolerated in Victorian England because there was a belief then, and some people still believe it, that animals don't actually feel pain. It's ludicrous, of course, but that's just an automatic response. They're not really in pain like humans are. People said that all the time in the Victorian age, and they still say it today, but eventually people came to realize, no, cutting a living creature open is always wrong.
Well, there's even a section of the book where, because, Prendick kind of has a scientific background and is a scientist himself, they're discussing it, and they're both talking about the pros of vivisection.
Yes.
The hero of this book agrees with Dr. Moreau, at least on that front.
Yes, Prendick studied with Huxley, just like Wells did in real life.
Yeah.
So Prendick, again, can be seen as a substitute for Wells himself, which is something he often does. And Wells had no problem with vivisection because he taught biology.
Yeah.
And so having animals cut up like that was something very common to him. And he also respected the tremendous medical advances that had been made through vivisection. So this would have been a good opportunity for him to show vivisection in a positive light, but he so doesn't do that.
He missed that mark. Just to
I don't think he was trying to give a pro-vivisection argument, because Dr. Moreau was clearly completely insane.
Yeah, it's alluded to him constantly. It's very clear that Dr. Moreau is playing God.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's one of those sociopaths who shoots someone in the head and then sips tea and has a casual conversation a few seconds later.
There's multiple times in the book where he goes, "Pain, pleasure. What's the difference to an animal?"
My favorite line was, well, it's not perfect, but then it took God millions of years to create man. I've only been at it for a few years myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Doc. So whether it makes an anti-vivisectionist argument, even though in real life, Wells did not have any difficulty with vivisection. It's awful. So what else can we say about the book?
Oh my goodness. I would love to talk, being that it is a book about literally a mad scientist on a secluded island, creating...
that whole concept of the mad scientist on a secluded island. Yeah. This is where it all comes from.
Yes. It is the mad scientist book.
He's the trope namer.
He is. Whereas, this is a mad scientist on an island creating these weird human-animal hybrids, the beast folk. The beast folk. It is, of course, a book about human nature, and you can't talk about human nature without talking about society. Mm-hmm. So the beast folk, once they are changed, they are forced to live by a certain set of rules. They've created their own society, and they have rules that they must follow that are set in place by Dr. Moreau. The only time Dr. Moreau he doesn't care about his creations. That's what drives me nuts.
He just lets them go and wander around in the jungle if he's dissatisfied with them, and he's always dissatisfied because they're never perfect.
That's he's trying to become this godlike creature that can create man. That is his goal, and he's constantly disappointed. He is disappointing himself over and over and over again. The definition of madness. Yeah. What is it?
Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. In the beginning, Moreau just shot his creatures in the head. He wasn't happy with them. And then he started letting them go to wander around in the jungle.
Yeah, if you find the beast folk sort of area where they're all living together with this faux society, great. If not, and you're killed by another animal on the island who hasn't, been transformed yet, well, that's just what happens. Yeah,
and there's this bizarre pseudo-religion the beast folk have, which Moreau claims he's not responsible for indoctrinating that into them. But it kind of obviously he takes advantage of it, because their religion makes him God.
Yeah.
He is God and Satan in this religion.
Yeah, well, he is the punisher. If they break, he feels very Old Testament God, where if you break one of the rules, that's the only time he interacts with them. If you break one of the rules, I'm going to take you back to the lab, which they all call the House of Pain. Yeah. Which is, they'll take you back to the House of Pain to experiment on you more until you behave, which is just absolutely...
it's stomach churning. It's so awful.
So you've got these animals that are basically mimicking humans, forced to follow these rules, they're not allowed to eat meat, no flesh, no fish. They cannot bend to drink. They cannot chase. They cannot, claw the bark off trees. So you have these animals that are rejecting their own nature to try to fit into this mold of society. And it's kind of this whole book is about that line between human and beast, but at our core we are animals, yet we have a civilization and rules.
Yeah, they're being forced into a mold where it doesn't belong. One of the rules is they're not allowed to kill, yet many of them are carnivores. Yeah. And it somehow never occurs to Moreau the issues he's going to have with that.
Well, I think, just something to touch on, and I do like how this is kind of carried out through the whole book. At the beginning of the book, when Prendick is on that little buoy with the two other, the other, Helms, I think, is one, and then unnamed sailor.
Unnamed sailor,
They're drawing lots, basically, to see which of them they're going to eat, even though Prendick is very like, I'm a gentleman, and I certainly will not say the word out loud. Because one does not think of such things when you're a Victorian gentleman.
That's how the book starts.
That's how the book starts.
On that raft with two other guys, and they draw lots to decide who will be cannibalized. So right away you start with a vision of human nature that's really horrible.
Well, and when one of them draws the short straw, doesn't want to be the victim, the two other guys who are not Prendick wind up, fighting, getting into this tussle, and ultimately they both die. They fall off the boat and they plunge into the freezing cold water.
It's no wonder Prendick comes to the island and he's not all that horrified by what he sees, because he's already seen the worst of human nature right in front of his eyes.
Well, it's that thing where if you put people in a survival situation, we become beasts. If you remove things like God or the rules or the structure of society, we will revert to our beast-like nature. When Dr. Moreau is no longer enforcing those rules, the beast folk, they revert immediately.
The beast flesh is stubborn, Moreau says. They revert very quickly back to norm. So if he was trying to make an argument for vivisection, he really fails in every possible level. It's literally a poster child for anti-vivisection. You can't say animals feel pain differently than people, because there's no difference between people and animals, and they make that explicit several times in this book. There's no difference at all. Now, one thing that struck me as I was reading it is, it sounds like a parody of colonialism. Did that occur to you?
Oh, absolutely.
He's coming into this island full of animals and trying to make them into human beings, which is exactly how many of the colonial powers saw the native people of the countries that they conquered. Oh, we can get them to wear clothes and go to Sunday school, and we'll make proper Christian gentlemen out of them. And how the people of Africa or China felt about that, it was never in question, because, they're just, dumb brutes.
Well, now you must follow our strict Victorian rules, because we have come in and we have all the power.
Wells was accused of being a racist by a lot of people, and there is evidence of that. But his political views and his views on race are extremely complicated. And like Dr. Moreau says, that he made a gorilla into an approximation of a Negroid man, which is also Dr. Moreau talking. So we already know he's actually, bug house crazy at that point. So, the fact that Dr. Moreau is racist as well as being a sociopath and killer, it's like, It
is hard to separate what, was Wells' perspective on it and what was the perspective of the everyman, the Victorian that is reading this. Because, Prendick is supposed to be that, that is the Victorian reader experiencing this world. That's the person you're going to
We see it through Prendick's eyes. Yeah, exactly.
And then you've got, I'm blanking on his name, it starts with an M, but Moreau's assistant, who is like Prendick's best friend, but then once they get to the island, he's buddy-buddy with all the beast folk.
He gets along with them pretty well,
He even, towards the end, he even shares his alcohol with them, and he's a big lush.
He drinks too much. He's a man, I said he's a man full of human flaws. He represents the weakness in human nature. He's alcoholic, and also we can add homophobia to Wells's crimes. One thing I learned from the annotated edition was, when he talks about the theaters he used to attend and the bars he used to go to, if he were Victorians, you'd recognize all of those as being notorious gay hangouts. So that scene where he talks about his past is meant to imply to Prendick that, he's gay, which was also Wells clearly saw as a human failing, one of his weaknesses that render him unfit. Wells didn't like colonialism because, it's very much War of the Worlds was an attack on the colonial powers and how they treated people. But on the other hand, he also was a utopianist who believed that everyone should work together. And since not everyone is going to work together to make a perfect world, sometimes you have to be pushed into it. He felt that very strongly, but he also hated fascism.
Complicated man.
Like I said, he is complicated. There's talk about tearing down one of his statues for his racist views. But if you actually study him, he has so many different layers to him.
Well, we'll never really know, because we can't sit down and, ask him. Not unless you know somebody who's really great at throwing a nice seance.
I know. Well, yeah, Conan Doyle did write books after his death, and he was channeled by some of his spiritualist medium friends. Excellent. But we don't have that with Wells.
Nope.
There is so much in this book, so much like stomach-churning stuff.
It's a lot. There is a lot in this very thin book.
Oh, God. Yeah, it's a thin book. Everything Wells writes is so short. Yeah. He packs so much into it. At the time it came out, like I said, it was not as well received as War of the Worlds or Time Machine. It was considered an inferior work. The Daily Telegraph called it a morbid aberration in his fledgling career.
Nuts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No one really saw that there was any like depth to it at all. They just saw the surface. Wells, as I said, was a scientist, and yet one of his gifts is he can describe things that can't possibly exist in ways that make them seem plausible. Mm-hmm. The whole idea of this kind of surgery is kind of ridiculous, and yet the way they talk about it in the book, you start buying into it really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you never doubt for a second this is really happening. Like, you never doubt the Martian invasion or the time machine or anything, 'cause he draws you into it. I also think it was a book that probably made a lot of people feel uncomfortable, more so in Victorian England than now.
Well, especially when you criticize society and you akin mankind to beasts and beasts to mankind, especially in Victorian England, that was a thick, hard line separating us. When you start to blur that line, of course, you're going to alienate a portion of your audience. Yeah. People are going to see that and immediately go, "No, I reject this."
Oh yeah,
this makes me uncomfortable.
Just did not think about the concepts that he brought up in it because it was so difficult to wrap your head around. I'll talk about the movies in a minute, but one thing I learned was the first film, Island of Lost Souls, with Charles Laughton, was banned in 14 states in the United States because it talks about evolution, and it has implied bestiality. Yeah, so for evolution and bestiality, 14 states in the United States banned it, and it was banned in England completely for many years because of its gruesome topic and subject matter.
Wow.
Yeah, Wells was fine with that because he hated the movie. But that's how controversial a bad film version of it was.
Oh, yeah, no, I could see how, this subject matter in the wrong hands. Yeah, absolutely.
It wasn't the worst movie version of it by far. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But
I can only imagine.
There's so many things to unpack in this book. The complicated dynamics of the different characters.
Every single character in this has such depth, and there is so much going on beneath the surface that it's nuts that this book is this thin. It is crazy that this book is this thin.
And that's with footnotes and an appendix and a major appendix.
I know.
It's like,
the version I have is like this and like this wide.
Yeah, the impact the book had is huge. The whole concept of uplifting animals is used in science fiction constantly. Yeah. David Brin actually wrote an entire series of books called Uplift. Yep. About intelligent dolphins and chimpanzees that go into space and things like that. And so that became a definite part of like pop culture in so many ways. There was a punk band called House of Pain.
Yeah.
I'm familiar. His stuff gets around, and the famous chant that the animal men do, not to go on all fours for "Are we not men," was also the inspiration for the band Devo.
Yeah.
Devo being short for devolution.
Oh.
And one of their hit songs when they were first started was, "Are we not men? We are Devo," which they would chant endlessly in the course of the pop song. So hugely inspirational to a lot of people. Like I said, it has a bigger impact probably than anyone at the time could have guessed.
I would say the modern audience for this book is far more receptive than... just because, like I said, it's in everything. Rereading it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember the crazy scientist in this and this and this and this, and it just kind of became endless,
Plus, now you actually can combine animal genomes in a way that in Wells's time was absolutely ludicrous and ridiculous. He couldn't even fathom that, so he had to invent the idea of evolution through surgery, essentially.
Yeah.
A bloody business, but it must be done. Yeah, Moreau is such a great villain. He's just awful in every possible way.
He's just, I think it's too late to call him kooky, but definitely way too late to call him kooky. But Yeah, the fact that he's just so blasé about the pain and suffering. He's very... And the fact that he, like, at least in Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein felt something for his creation.
Yeah.
He feels nothing. He just feels nothing for his creations. Only when he gets to punish them does he really feel anything.
Yeah.
He's just such a boilerplate villain. Mm-hmm. He's a great archetypical villain.
There's a hysterical scene where Prendick is trying to kill himself.
Yeah.
Because he thinks Dr. Moreau wants to experiment on him. And he's like, if you think I'm going to kill you, then why would killing yourself make it better? Yeah. You're going to die either way, so you might as well come out and we'll have some tea and we'll discuss the whole situation.
Sit down.
Sit down, yes.
We'll discuss your eventual demise. Sit down, have a crumpet. He is great. He is very funny. He's one of the funnier...
Yeah, that's when Prendick starts to realize that Moreau isn't experimenting on people, he's experimenting on animals. There are no people on the island except for him, Moreau, and his assistant. Everyone else he's met has been an animal. Yeah.
Nuts.
So, the movie versions.
I'm ready for the movie
Oh,
versions.
God, yeah. The first one was Island of Lost Souls. They couldn't even call it Island of Dr. Moreau. Island of Lost Souls with Charles Laughton, 1933. Now, if it's one thing I think that everybody in the audience can agree on, is we all love sexy cat girls, right?
Unless they're in the new Cats movie.
Yeah, except for the Cats movie. However, Wells apparently didn't have that particular fetish because although there's several female beast men, he doesn't describe them in particularly flattering terms.
No, they're still animals.
Yeah, Prendick barely noticed. He's repelled by them at first. Later, he gets kind of used to them. But that's the best he ever gets is he's kind of used to them. Whereas having a human-animal hybrid who is a woman created from a big cat.
Yeah, the Puma woman. Yeah.
The Puma woman is mentioned in the book, but she doesn't really play a big role in it.
She's kind of...
Yeah, so Island of Lost Souls has Lola, the Panther Woman. And she gets huge amount of hype in the posters and the early ads for it. There's even one version of the poster that has her like luxuriating, leaning back naked with her black hair falling across her breasts. So they knew what sold in those days. Got them banned in 14 states. And there's no real female characters in Wells's work.
Yeah. No.
So the movie felt compelled to add a second female character, Prendick's fiance, who somehow manages to sail to the island to rescue him at the end, to save him from the clutches of the evil Panther Woman, who's going to have her wicked ways with him, because he just couldn't resist her. Every movie version ends with a climactic scene where Dr. Moreau is killed. And the book is actually killed kind of off camera. Yeah. We know that it happens, but we don't actually see it happen.
It's
in the
like
movies
a sentence.
It's always really melodramatic. And that was in the 30s, and it lay fallow for a long time. It wasn't until the 70s, 1977, they did a version, which I saw in theaters as a child. Michael York and Burt Lancaster, Island of Dr. Moreau. In the 70s, they had great makeup effects.
Oh, I bet. I'm like, if anybody's going to do animal people, an animal people movie, right, it's going to be directors in the 70s.
They hired the same guy who did the Planet of the Apes movies to do the prosthetics. Yeah. And Planet of the Apes also one of the projects very much inspired by Dr. Moreau. And Burt Lancaster is great as Moreau because he's a classic for the golden age of Hollywood. He has a sort of genial grandfather. Well, I had no choice but to kill them, you see. And he goes... Yes. Lancaster just loves the part. You can tell he's fantastic in it. And of course, there's yet another Panther Woman played by Barbara Carrera.
Oh, excellent.
Who is very sexy, much like the first woman from the 30s, even more so because it's the 70s. Now, in this one, they've already hit on the idea of exchanging genetic material. Even though the human genome hadn't been cracked in the 70s, Moreau was ahead of his time. So they at one point, they actually inject animal genetic material into our hero Michael York to change him into an animal. Oh. So he goes to a big chunk of the film with like a baboon nose, You
like animal muscle.
Yeah, exactly. So they play up the whole there's no difference between man and animals even more. Each version ends with the hero falling for the cat girl. Because, of course.
I mean, if anime has taught me anything, it's...
Absolutely. Yeah. The worst, or at least most controversial version was in 96.
Yeah?
That was Island of Dr. Moreau with Val Kilmer, Marlon Brando, and David Thewlis. The movie is such...
me with that cast.
It was such an unmitigated disaster. There's actually a film about the difficulties of making it.
Really?
Called Lost Souls.
Beautiful.
Oh, my God, this film. The original director, Richard Stanley, had a nervous breakdown and was replaced in mid-production. But he later snuck back on the set disguised as one of the animal people and actually was filmed in several scenes by the director who replaced him unknowingly. He came back as one of the dog people for the crowd shots.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So during the course of this film, Marlon Brando's daughter passed away, so he was in no mood to make a movie. He also famously never memorized his lines. Val Kilmer's wife filed for divorce while he was filming this in Australia. So he didn't really want to do it either at that point. They already had a couple of actors walk out. David Thewlis was brought in at the last minute to replace somebody else. I think Guy Pearce was supposed to be starring in it. So Thewlis was brought in as Prendick at the last minute. Had no idea what he was getting himself in for, apparently. Fairuza Balk plays the sexy cat girl. Okay. A role she is very, very good at. And the shot of her belly dance sequence is like all over YouTube. She's a very sexy belly dance. And the cat girl is always so human you can't really tell she's a cat girl.
Does she just have like ears and a tail?
She should. That would have been so cool if she did. Fairuza in an interview said she had no idea what was going on the set most of the time. And at one point, Marlon Brando told her, "You're a beautiful girl. Don't worry about it. Just make up something. I'm not doing that. I'm not reading my lines."
We're going to improv this whole thing. Let's go.
Yeah. Brando walked off the set, and fortunately, they were able to fake his death sequence. And then, as in the book, they try to pretend Dr. Moreau is still alive, so the beast men will still be afraid of them. But the movie gives you the sight of Val Kilmer disguising himself as Marlon Brando and doing a Brando impression to cow the beast men into submission. Yeah, Marlon Brando plays a Nobel Prize-winning geneticist. They also use electronic implants in their brain, the pain center of the brain, instead of a whip, so it's very high-tech torture. David Thewlis's character, even when he knows that Fairuza Balk is a cat girl, she's like, so she's a cat girl. It's like, you take what you can get.
It's like one in Vegas.
Exactly. It's a really loopy movie. Clips of it, again, all over YouTube. But the whole idea has been unofficially done dozens of times. Almost anything that involves genetic engineering that talks about chimera creatures is almost inevitably hearkening back to this. The books have handled it much better.
Yeah.
Moreau's been a stock character in a lot of books set in this age. The copy of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen that I should just keep in here I should never put it back on the shelf because we keep referring to it. And this one, he's working for the British government. And when during the Martian invasion, Mina and Quatermain are sent to track down this mysterious reclusive doctor to get the result of his experiments because he's been working on germ warfare, of course. And he's living not on an island at this point. He's out somewhere in the British countryside where they constantly run across his creations living in the woods, which look suspiciously like characters from Wind in the Willows and Winnie the Pooh.
I love it.
When they're trying to find his cabin, a toad driving a small vehicle comes up and points the direction to Moreau's cabin. Yeah.
Gosh, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, and they also run into Prendick, who's wandering around basically naked in the woods. You see them, haven't you? The animal men. They're all over the place. They're watching us even now. And then, okay.
Full mental breakdown. It's fine.
Yeah. Slightly better, though I have not read it. I've just read the reviews of it. The Army of Dr. Moreau, where Sherlock Holmes. A number of bodies have been found with bizarre, animal bites on them. And so Holmes tracks down Moreau. I think this one is also doing secret work for the British government. There's a Boer man wearing a World War I army uniform on the cover, which is a chilling concept of what they could be working on in that story. But the best by far is Theodore Gosse's Adventures of the Athena Society, The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. This tells us the secret story of the Puma Girl. Catherine Monroe, cat to her friends. She's Dr. Moreau's most successful creation. She could mostly pass for human. Although every now and then the claws come out, and she does have kind of a quick temper. But in this one, she joins forces with the daughters of Dr. Jekyll and the daughter of Mr. Hyde and a bunch of other female characters, the Bride of Frankenstein.
They add Catwoman to the group.
Yes, they have a cat girl in the group. They join forces to fight crime. And she gives us what really happened that Wells fudged on at the end. In this one, she's hopelessly in love with Prindrick, who offers to take her back to civilization, but then abandons her on the island to die. Yeah.
Great.
So fortunately, she was rescued.
Yep.
And she finally makes her way back to England, and she discovers that Moreau is dead. She did in fact kill Moreau when she escaped. She wasn't in her right mind, not her fault. But she gets back to England. She discovers that there are still animal men running around London, working as henchmen for a evil secret society. And she realizes Prindrick probably learned a lot more from Moreau than Wells let on. He's continuing the experiments now.
He stole the notebooks.
He stole all the notebooks. So naturally, it has to be shut down. Yeah. It's very good. And she does not have a problem with reverting, which is one of the big things. One of the things that really chilled me when I was a kid, it bothered me again as an adult, was at the end of the book, Prindrick is left on the island with only the Beastmen for company. Mm-hmm. I'm going to spoil the ending, but yeah, it is over 100 years old. And one by one, they start reverting back. One of the 8 men that he talks to one day starts to lose his power of speech. It reminded me really scarily of Flowers for Algernon.
Yeah.
That was so powerful, and watching them slowly lose their intelligence and go back to being animals again. What Moreau did was horrible, and yet he gave them a life outside of being an animal. It in no way excuses the horrific crimes, unpardonable crimes that he did. But watching them become human again, when they're going back to nature, what they should have been all along,
But having known what it was.
They were so close.
Yeah,
they were close so to being human,
But that's not what they are.
But that's not what they are. That's not what they were intended to be. And it's heartbreaking. It really is.
No, absolutely. And just to see the comprehension, it felt almost like people who would go through dementia, that you lose yourself.
You do, yeah. And one by one, all of the animal people that he'd been able to talk to and befriend start to go away from him.
They lose themselves.
Yeah, they
revert
themselves
back to nothing more than the animal nature, which that's all they were supposed to have in the first place. Yeah. But is it worse knowing what it's like to be able to reason and then lose that?
Yeah. That is heartbreaking. Yeah. It's a horrific ending to the story, really, not a happy ending.
No.
And Prindrick is certainly destroyed by what he sees and does.
Even when he goes back to society, he sees people as the beast folk, and he has to live in seclusion. He can't be around people anymore because we are animals.
Yeah. Also a very strong Gulliver's Travels vibe.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, very Gulliver's Travels.
I can definitely tell that H.G. Wells loved Gulliver's Travels.
Yeah, but Prindrick at the end has to be a recluse because he literally can't be around people because they're too much like animals. Yeah. And isn't that true?
I've got a quote that we can close out on.
Yes. Actually, I have one too. Want to do mine first? All right.
Yes.
Okay, mine is a quote from Prindrick. When they're trying to convince the Beastmen that Moreau hasn't died, he says, "Animals may be cunning, but it takes a true man to lie."
Ooh, that's a good one. That is good. The one I have, it's from Prindrick, and it's about the beast folk. In the shackles of humanity, in a fear that never died, fretted by a law they could not understand.
Yeah, laws they could not understand. God, that is heartbreaking.
Oh, but such a good book. Oh my gosh,
Fantastic
if you haven't read it, please read it.
Book 120 years old.
It holds up.
You can read in a couple of hours. It's like, oh my God, what an amazing book. All right, so let's put an end to that right now. We'll come back in the future.
Yes, we will.
Yes. Until then, I have been Ed.
I have been Michaela.
See you next time. Till then, be healthy and be safe.
Be happy. Bye.